does this bill infringe on free speech? Because that's what a lot of people are talking about. And the answer is... Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. A story dropped on February 7th about a new bill proposed by the NDP that would make it illegal to promote anything to do with fossil fuels. But what does this really mean?
Let's take a look. So the bill in question is Bill C-372, an act respecting fossil fuel advertising, which is interesting because it doesn't really respect fossil fuel advertising at all. So what is this doing? Well, let's take a look at what the purpose of the bill is. So, as it reads, the purpose of this act is to provide a legislative response to a national public health and environmental problem of substantial and pressing concern and, in particular, A, to protect the health of Canadians in light of conclusive evidence implicating the burning of fossil fuels in numerous adverse health effects, including fatalities. B, to protect the environment in light of conclusive evidence implicating the burning of fossil fuels in the climate emergency, which is causing harm to ecosystems as well as numerous debilitating and fatal diseases in humans. C, to prevent the public from being deceived or misled with respect to the environmental and health hazards of using fossil fuels. And D, to enhance public awareness of those hazards. So, the whole alleged purpose of this bill is to prevent Canadians from being provided misleading information and disinformation, and the fact that allegedly fossil fuels are the bane of all of our existence. We shouldn't be trying to promote these at all or speaking positively about these in any business sense whatsoever. So the question is does this bill infringe on free speech? Because that's what a lot of people are talking about. And the answer is kind of. It doesn't outright, but there's some red flags in here. So let's get into where it does not infringe on free speech.
Under application, it reads, this act does not apply in respect of A, a literary, dramatic, musical, cinematographic, scientific, educational, or artistic work, production or performance that uses or depicts fossil fuels, fossil fuel-related brand elements, or the production of fossil fuels, whatever the mode or form of its expression, if no consideration is given, directly or indirectly, by a producer, a retailer, or an entity that has one of its purposes to promote fossil fuels that use or depiction in the work, production, or performance. B, an opinion, commentary, or report in respect of fossil fuels, fossil fuel-related brand elements, or the production of fossil fuels if no consideration is given, directly or indirectly, by a producer, a retailer, or an entity that has one of its purposes to promote fossil fuels for the reference to the fossil fuels, fossil fuel-related brand elements, or the production of fossil fuels in that opinion, commentary, or report. Or C, the name of an entity or the name under which the entity carries on business. What does all that mean?
What does all that mean? So what that basically means is if you're watching a show or producing a show, rather, a movie or a book or a written piece or, a theater play or anything to do with dramatization or entertainment.
Or art.
And it is not funded by a fossil fuel organization with the intent of promoting fossil fuels, then it's fair game. The second one is you can be walking down the street and have an opinion of fossil fuels being great, and that's fair game. If you're commenting or reporting on fossil fuels within the media, then it's fair game as long as, again, it's not to promote fossil fuels and being paid for by fossil fuel organizations. And the last one is basically if the name could be characterized as, that's promoting fossil fuels, but it's just the name of a brand or entity and has nothing to do with fossil fuels, then that's fair game. So they're trying to say that freedom of expression outside of the business sense of fossil fuels is fair game. So let's just take a look at prohibition. It is prohibited for a person to promote a fossil fuel related brand element, or the production of a fossil fuel except as authorized by the provisions of this act or the regulations. So here's the issue. So if you work for a fossil fuel company and you talk positively about fossil fuels because you work for a fossil fuel company, then it could be argued that you're breaking the law. This is where the red flag is. And the other thing to do here is, how are you supposed to conduct business if you're not allowed to advertise? Like, this is the issue here. But here's the thing. Whether you're worried about this or you're not worried about this, it actually doesn't matter at all. Why doesn't it matter? Well, let's take a look. So this is a summary of the bill and the stages at which it navigates Parliament. You've seen this before on some of our videos as we talk about Bill C-18 or Bill C-11, which, Trudeau and Freeland and all the rest of the Liberals are trying to censor free speech and gain control of the news media even more than they already are. Right? Okay. So you'll see that what is checked off is first reading completed on February 5th, 2024. Now, there's something very significant to take note of in the status of this bill. What is that, Fox?
So number one, this bill is a private member's bill. And I think that's significant because it was put forth by the NDP. If it was important, if it was something that the Liberals, the government, would be backing, it would be a government bill. It would not be a private member's bill. So that's number one. But number two, because it's a private member's bill, it has to go through what's called the order of precedence. And you can see right under summary, it says it's outside the order of precedence. What does that mean?
So in order to understand what that means, we have to understand what order of precedence is. So what's that? Well, order of precedence is kind of how it sounds, where precedence is essentially priority, right? We all kind of know that. Well, when it comes to government bills and how they end up being debated in the House of Commons, when it's a government bill, they get to decide, as in the sitting government, they get to decide what bills are debated when, which makes sense. They're in the government. They have to run the country. Now, private members' bills, they work differently. So there is an hour allotted to private members' bills where these bills that are submitted by private members get to be put in for reading and debated. How do they get there? Well, after you present a private member's bill, which is what happened on February 5th, it goes into kind of a lottery. And there's a lottery of many, many, many different private members' bills put forth by members of Parliament, and they're waiting to actually be drawn out of this lottery to have the opportunity to do something with their bill. So they wait essentially in limbo until their name is drawn to actually be able to get on the order of precedence. So there's already a whole bunch of bills that are on the order of precedence right now, waiting for their turn during private members' hour. So we look at this and we're saying, okay, this was completed on February 5th, 2024. When would this have a possibility of actually coming back to the House? Well, let's take a look at another private member's bill by a Conservative member, and it is still waiting in the lottery. This is Bill C-257, and it was submitted by Garnet Genuous. Now, the first reading was completed almost 2 years ago, March 3rd, 2022. And it is still outside the order of precedence. So odds are Garnet Genuous is going to be presenting this bill before Charlie Angus. Okay, so let's follow that to completion. Let's say Charlie is going to be waiting for as long as Garnet Genuis is. Well, then he would have a possibility of getting on the docket in, let's say, February of 2026. Oh, wait a minute. What happens before February of 2026?
Well, definitely for sure in the fall of 2025, an election needs to be called, which means any bills, including private members' bills, that are still in the House will be dead on arrival. Everything stops once an election is called. However, we believe that all signs are pointing to a spring 2024 election, which means that this bill, this private members bill that the NDP are trying to put forward about fossil fuels, is going to be dead in the water in just a few months.
But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that the election goes as scheduled in the fall of 2025. So the question would be, why would you bother submitting this bill if it has virtually no chance of making it into law? Why would you waste your time? Because this takes time to actually write this bill. Like, let's just go back.
It's a long bill.
It's not insignificant. Like, there's a lot of work here.
Some bills are only a couple sentences long, but this one is quite lengthy.
But there's all of the research and references and everything behind this too. It's not just like this, these pages. So there's a lot of work that actually goes into a bill. So again, you ask the question, why would they do this? Well, it has to do with our belief that an election is coming this spring. Because what would a type of bill like this garner support from? It would garner support from fanatical environmentalists or people who have really latched on to the climate change narrative. People that have really latched on to the belief that all fossil fuels are the bane of our existence and they need to be eliminated. What type of people, what demographic on the political spectrum can you see those people belonging to?
Liberals, and I would even hazard to say younger liberals.
That's what I think as well. So what this bill seems like to me is a theater bill. And what that is a bill that the party in question, the member in question, has no intention of actually making it to the floor, but is so provocative in nature that it gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of people fired up, and it can really get a lot of attention from a certain demographic of people. And that would be handy if you think that you're going into an election shortly.
And I find it curious that the media has picked up this bill in particular and is starting to talk about it. Private members' bills are created by the opposition, so the NDP, the Conservatives, the Bloc, etc. But it's not often that the media talks about them. What the media loves talking about is private members' bills that may have something to do with abortion, like Kathy Wagenthal's bill, which we already did the deep dive on that one. It didn't really have anything to do with abortion, but those are the kind of bills that they like to grab onto so that they can show how evil the Conservatives that they're trying to legislate abortion. But this bill in particular, it kind of made me wonder why are they focused on this private members bill? I think the media is trying to kind of help this theatrical bill in the sense that it's showing it to the public. Look what the NDP are trying to do. It's going to make some people really upset, and it's going to try to pull some of those young Liberal voters over from the Liberals to show them, look, you can vote for the NDP because they care about the environment.
Because the NDP are quietly gaining ground on the Liberals, right? You're seeing in polls that there was a poll just before Christmas where it had the Liberals dead even with the Liberals, but there's standards of error that that occur there, so it probably wasn't dead even. But what you're seeing is consistently those polls are getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and this seems like one of these bills that acts as a dog whistle to those Liberal voters that are upset with the progress that the Liberals have made on climate change. And it kind of courts them over to the NDP side to gain some more support and siphon that away from the Liberals. So that's what this bill really seems like it's designed to do. It's highly provocative, gets a lot of media attention, and it has no chance of surviving to be actually read even once within this parliament.
Well, it's been read into Parliament with first reading, but it's extremely unlikely that it's going to reach second reading before an election is called.
Right. It hasn't even made it to debate yet. So that's what we think about this bill. So for any of you worried about this, put your worries to bed right now, because this has no chance of entering into law, even under the maximum term of this Liberal government. So take a breath, because that's not what this bill was intended to do, in our humble opinion. Now, Charlie Angus, who's the sponsor of this bill, took questions about this bill from reporters. So let's see what they had to say and what his responses were.
Yeah, Mark Ramsey of the Toronto Star. I'm curious, there's in the provisions in the legislation, there's something that says that any advertising from fossil fuel companies that promotes fossil fuels as good for the economy is part of the ban. Doesn't that make this kind of an effective, complete ban on fossil fuel advertising, or could you kind of clarify that?
Well, absolutely. We're dealing with an industry that has used every possible disinformation trick. And what we've seen since the climate catastrophe has been unfolding, the messaging has shifted. That, you can see it outside Parliament here. They'll say, as long as the world is using oil and gas, shouldn't it be Canada and Canadian oil and gas, meaning increasing production, meaning increasing export, that it is a benefit, that we need it. When we see that, the International Energy Agency has been very clear that around the world there's been a massive shift to renewables and to clean energy. But the messaging, and you see it particularly here in Ottawa, because they're trying to influence politicians to falsely accept the premise that we need to not only continue, but massively expand production, because it will benefit the economy. The damage that's being done to our economy is enormous. And I was just talking to a business this morning in Northern Ontario. This past summer, they were heavily damaged from lack of tourists because of smoke. Now they're suffering because we don't have enough snow on the ground from the hottest January ever. So that's the damage that's being done to the economy.
Dude, it's El Nino. That has nothing to do with climate change.
Yeah, it's funny. He likes to talk about the hottest February that Ontario is having. Why don't you talk to your buddies out in Nova Scotia? Because they're getting a crap ton of snow. Like, you don't get to just pick and choose. And, to say that, we shouldn't be continuing with fossil fuels. Okay, how would you like to get to work? How would you like to get overseas? How would you like to get goods to the stores and around the world? We just stop all fossil fuels tomorrow. How do you think that's going to work, Charlie?
But again, he hasn't thought all this stuff through, because he doesn't need to think all this stuff through. This bill is just a dog whistle. It's nothing more, and it's going to be dead in a couple months. Right.
So all of this is just bluster. Never mind the fact that he's completely out to lunch. Now, there's another article that the National Post put out, and they talk about Charlie's position on misinformation. And they say, this is a curious position for Angus to take. Of the misinformation out there, a good deal, if not a majority, comes from groups opposing fossil fuels. Whereas any oil and gas company must provide national regulators scientifically valid proof of the safety or viability of their projects, there is no equivalent standard or scrutiny for the hyperbole and panic-driven messages emanating from eco groups doing everything they can to stop fossil fuel development. And that's true.
And another thing, out of everybody out there, it seems to be the crazy climate change activists that like to destroy things. This just happened today. Activists spray paint on replica dinosaur skeleton at the Canadian Museum of Nature. This is in Ottawa. So yeah, some activists was standing there with, it looked like one of those things that you spray bugs with, but it was full of paint and was spraying it all over the gallery.
Okay, so you're mad at dinosaurs? What do you think you're doing here? Just like those Just Stop Oil idiots that they block traffic for hours and hours, and they think that they're doing the world a favor.
Yeah, out here, I'm like, I've got
Okay, so you're pissing everybody off. So, like, this is the thing. Like, look at the stunt that Jibo did when he got arrested. Right? This is the problem. And they're saying that, oh, well, you know, it's the oil and gas companies, you know, that are the problem. Yeah, you know, over the years they put out their misinformation campaigns. Show me a business that doesn't make it right. But when you actually look at the reality, you can't just stop using oil and gas. There's a transition. And in terms of the electric vehicles, the amazing thing is the electric vehicles, they're actually not going to be around long, because you have companies like BMW, Toyota, and the other companies, they're actually quickly getting out of electric vehicles.
Yeah, because they're combustible.
Right. And they're moving straight to hydrogen.
I mean, hydrogen's combustible too, but I received a recall notice for my plug-in electric hybrid a while back that, hey, your car could go up in flames for absolutely no reason, and we have no idea why or how to fix it.
So just be aware.
Yeah.
So, you know, like this is the thing, right? And we need to just acknowledge that, sure, at some point, do we want to move away from fossil fuels? Yeah. But guess what? That has to be a transition. You cannot just change an economy overnight. And in the meantime, you still have all of these countries out there burning coal. What they need to do is transition to natural gas. And we need to start transitioning off natural gas when it comes to electricity production and moving to nuclear. The problem with wind, the problem with solar, and these types of things is it relies on the weather to actually produce energy. And that's not predictable.
But nuclear is.
Right. Nuclear is guaranteed electricity at a steady state. But for all the wind farms, okay, so it's electricity when it's windy. And that's great, but then when it's not windy, what do? So the problem is as you're actually calculating load for that grid, you can't really rely on that.
Well, and if you have too much electricity on the grid, you have to dissipate it as well. Like, you can't just keep it on the grid. So that's why things like solar and wind farms, they're not predictable. So you can't predict the energy output that you're going to have.
Well, they're not practical either,
Yeah.
right? Because I guarantee you're not going to see very many stats from the environmentalists on how much energy production do these things literally produce. So during the evening and overnight, solar's not producing anything. And when there's no wind, the wind farms aren't producing anything.
Well, and I was reading a thread on Reddit today. Somebody out of Edmonton had said that they put solar panels on their roof, and they were told, oh, it's fine in the snow, don't worry about it. If it's a light dusting of snow, it's not a problem. He said he gets no energy output from those solar panels when there's even like a light dusting of snow.
Right.
It's not practical in a country that it can snow for 6 months out of the year.
So this is where we're at. Anyway, back to Charlie.
And Natasha Bilowski, Canada's National Observer. Question for you, Charlie. I'm wondering, you know, I know this bill was sort of just introduced, but have you seen any MPs from other parties indicate support for it as of yet?
One of the great things about having such great expertise here today with the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment is that they are starting to meet with MPs from all parties. The step from having launched the bill is now the campaign to bring support across party lines. And I think it's going to be really hard for MPs to say after what they saw last summer, after we almost lost Kelowna, after we almost lost so many other communities, for an MP not to recognize the need to take action.
Okay, so stopping companies from advertising fossil fuels, that's going to prevent forest fires. Got it.
No, what he's doing right there is he's setting up. Look how hard it's going to be for the other MPs to not support this bill because of all these horrible tragedies that happened within the past year. essentially saying, if you don't support this bill, you're a horrible monster because of all these things that happened and you don't care, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's the way the left loves to frame everything. It's shame and guilt tactics. But you know what? We're not going to show you any more about Charlie's questions because this is just, it's going to be the same thing over and over. It's going to be flawed logic. It's going to be sensationalism. And I don't think any of us really want to hear that.
Yeah, because again, it's not a bill that was designed to actually become a law. It's just a dog whistle to young Liberal voters who might want to consider voting NDP instead.
But it's an interesting chess move in the final play on this Liberal government, and expect more of these. Expect more moves by the NDP to be quite public, to try to influence the media attention and the attitude of voters towards the NDP, because Jagmeet is probably going to push really hard to try and be leader of the next opposition, because not only would that increase his salary by $90,000 a year, that increases his pension as well, as many people love to point out. So why would you not want another 4 years, 4 guaranteed years at $280,000, $290,000 a year, and that bumps up your pension significantly.
And not to mention, he'd get to live in Stormaway.
There you go. He gets to live in his own mansion with a private chef and live like he really aspires to. So that's Bill C-372, everybody. Nothing to worry about, but it's one more thing to pay attention to, however, in the NDP's quest to end Trudeau's government.